Back at it on the BCX here with another wellness check. One of my best friends in the industry, 30 minutes or less with SportsNet's Aaron Bronsteter. Hey, Bron, how the heck are you, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I'm so happy that you launched this channel because I can't get enough Brian Campbell in my life. So I'm happy that the BCX Express rolls on. It's like the
Yeah,
Lex
yeah.
Express back in the
We're,
day when he was hawking Ico Pro.
oh wow, when he slammed Yokozuna on
Yeah,
the
that's
aircraft
right.
carrier there, right?
Yeah.
Let we get 30 minutes to just catch up with each other here. And the talk of right now is Vince McMahon Netflix documentary. Have you had a chance to see it yet?
I haven't watched a single minute of it as of yet. So no, but you know what? I'm traveling next week, so I was thinking of downloading it onto my device and watching it while I'm in transit. So I'll have I guess, some insights for you on that. When the time comes. The thing is, I've been very disconnected from the world of pro wrestling for like probably 20 plus years at this point in time. So I'm sure I'll learn a lot of new stuff from watching the documentary. Like I took my kid to go see my two boys to go see what's it called? NEX? No, NXT? NXT. I'm
NXT,
getting
yes,
I'm
yes.
I'm getting the BEX and NXT
The
all my wires
SEX, yeah.
crossed.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
a
we went
lot
to
in
go
your
see
life.
NXT in Toronto, and it was really cool to see how the in-ring product has evolved from watching those matches. But yeah, like I'm pretty disconnected from pro wrestling.
That's actually what got me back into it in 2015 was how athletic the in-ring pro. I mean, when we were growing up, it was kick punch, right? Fat guy, little guy, kick punch, kick punch. Now it's like no matter what size you are, if you're not doing some tope suicida over the top rope, like who are you? Now, of course, I burnt myself out in the microwave of pro wrestling journalism and podcasting, but I do look back and say it was a fun era. Everyone says now the product's better than ever, but like when you just can't get back into something that you used to love, it's like you try, but it's like sandpaper every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't say I've put in a concerted effort. Like, it's cool watching it in HD. Also, like, this is gonna make me sound like a dinosaur, but like watching it in HD with like the intros and like the ramps and all that stuff, like it looks amazing. But I don't know. I'm covering the real thing now, like
Yeah.
so it's hard for me to go back. But
It,
it was
it,
cool seeing like the two of the women, I guess, that were competing on this event were like Olympic gymnasts or something. Like, so to see what they're able to do in terms of pro wrestling is pretty cool.
yeah, it's pretty awesome in that regard. You've done great work for years, of course, on TSN. Now with Sportsnet, are we at the 1 year anniversary of this big change for you? Is that correct?
We're getting there. It'll be at the beginning of next year. So my first time, like I first started doing stuff on air for them in January, back when the UFC came to Toronto. So it was a good timing in that regard.
How can you break down to me from an American's perspective, like the role Sportsnet has in Canadian sports?
Yeah. So in Canada, there are two kind of major players in terms of sports broadcasting. It's TSN and Sportsnet. But like in the US, like ESPN is kind of like the juggernaut. In Canada, it's kind of like a two-party system, so to speak. Like they're both really, really big, powerful entities. So that's kind of the big difference. Like we don't have really like a CBS Sports Network or like a Fox Sports, or like there's so much variety in terms of networks in the US. But ESPN is kind of like the one major player, or I guess the biggest player by far. Whereas here, it's kind of like two players that are kind of on equal ground.
Yeah, and so the UFC TV deal moved to Sportsnet, and that means Aaron Bronsteter did. How are you sort of feeling 1 year into this?
That's awesome. Like it's interesting because in my previous job, I was very much like, here's the keys to the car, have fun. But at the same time, like I was driving solo, right? So like if you're trying to drive from Toronto to Florida and it's like a 24-hour drive, it would be really helpful to have someone. Like it's cool to hit the open road, but it would really nice to have another passenger that can split the driving duties with you and help you along the way and maybe read the map. And of course, now we don't really need maps, but you know what I mean? Like it's good to have a co-pilot, whereas now at Sportsnet, I've got like a whole team of people working on UFC all the time, and it's just very refreshing in that regard to have that kind of dynamic. It's been a real blessing for me to have that in my life now, and takes a lot of things off of my plate that I didn't necessarily otherwise like doing.
For sure, for sure. Always love the great work you do in interviewing, and we got a chance to hang out for a bit in back in Sphere Week. Me there for Canelo, you there for UFC 306. We hit the record store, and I'm still kind of unlocking some of those gems that I picked up. That live James Gang album, dude. Joe Walsh just like gets nuts in the second half of that thing. I've been fired up. We're gonna hit music, but you were there covering the Sphere, and for all the fallout and analysis I never got to ask you on a friend level, dude. What the hell was that like?
It was awesome. Like the Sphere, you saw Dead and Company there, and I saw that U2 experience there a couple days before I saw the UFC event. Like anytime I go to Vegas, I need to see what's happening at the Sphere because I need more Sphere in my life. Like I'm somebody who has ADHD, and the beauty of the Sphere is it's like an open invitation to be distracted. Like it's okay to get this. Usually, if I'm at a concert and I've got like some guy 3 rows down holding his phone during the concert, I'm getting distracted by that, getting distracted by people talking to my right. The Sphere is like, here's all these distractions that will like help immerse you into the show and raise the level of entertainment that you're having in that moment. And rather than being distracted by all kinds of other little things that are happening around you, be distracted by this or that. And like I just kind of love that. And it's really a bucket list venue. That's what I've been saying to people who are asking me how it is. Like you need to go to the Sphere at some point for something
You do.
before you die. Like when I was watching that U2 show, I just thought like as soon as I get out of here, I got to send my dad a message and say, hey, like go watch the Eagles when they're there or whoever. Like you just need to get there.
It really is. I mean, obviously, it helps if I think if you've got because somebody asked me that in my live chat yesterday, like, what band would be the ultimate Sphere band? And I'm kind of thinking like maybe Pink Floyd in their prime, maybe Radiohead today. A lot of people say Tool. It's kind of depending on your flavor, but you do kind of need a band that coincides with what they can do with the visuals, right? I mean, for Dead and Company in particular, they not only had a different world for each song, sometimes within key moments in each songs, the worlds would change dramatically. Do you sort of have a working like if this band gets the call, I drop everything and I load the family in the car and we drive from Mississauga, Toronto to where are you? Hamilton? Where are you? Greater
Scarborough,
Toronto?
Scarborough. I'm in
Scarborough
Scarborough. Yeah.
over there to Vegas. Do you have yet in your mind like that one band that would make you drop everything?
I mean, I would love to go see Radiohead. Radiohead's a great mention. When I was watching that U2 experience, I was like, I would love to see Slow Dive play here. Like that was kind of the
Slow
band that came to
Dive?
mind was Slow Dive.
I
Like
don't know this
hearing like
band.
yeah, hearing like a shoegaze band just kind of like really like rip guitars or like a My Bloody Valentine or something like that in the Sphere with the different visual elements would just be like a mind-blowing experience for me. That was like when I was watching, that was the band that actually came to mind. I'm like, Slow Dive would never play here. It's not realistic. They play venues that hold like 1,500 people. So them playing the Sphere is like not ever going to happen. But like that's the kind of band that I think you could really maximize what you're seeing there. Like if Ween played there, I would love that too. But again, like not a big enough act to justify the Sphere. Radiohead, I think, would be great there. Like I don't like the band Muse, but I feel like they'd be a band that would be very, well suited for playing at the Sphere. Like just because a lot of their acts, like I saw them play live once at a festival, and it was like being in a video game. There were all of these different audio and visual kind of elements that really kind of brought you into the performance. And like, well, I'm not a big fan of that band. Like I see the merits of having them play at the Sphere. Like that would make a lot of
Sure.
sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, Dying Fetus wouldn't be my first choice there, but
No.
it's going to be interesting to see how I think a how watered down the Sphere experience might end up getting if we see too many bands go there or bands that don't belong there. And the same thing with combat sports, really. I mean, I know they had the NHL draft there before they ever had the UFC match, which I don't think the draft is the perfect setting for that. But I also wonder, will we see new spheres pop up? It's not like something that can be instantly reproduced because of the money involved. But like you and I have talked about this before off camera, where like these growing number of bars, I think they're in what, California or whatever, that are almost like
Cosm.
you're
Yeah.
were
They're
you
called
sitting?
Cosm.
Yeah, it feels like you're sitting in the stadium. The screen is circular and massive and they zoom right in. Like we had a feeling coming into 306 like could this event be transformative in the future way that people digest and watch fights? Most people watch fights at home. It's not the closed circuit area. You can for some boxing go to movie theaters still, which I think is cool. But do you see the Sphere playing a role in any kind of like future change in how we consume concerts and fights?
Concerts, yeah. In terms of like fights and sporting events, it really is not a great venue for sports. Like I thought that the UFC did a great job at maximizing its capacities for that particular night. But like being in there for a sporting event, like it's not a great sporting venue unless you're really going to make use of all of the different dynamic visuals. Like I think that you could hold a good boxing event in there. Like if you have two of the right fighters, and you can find a way to make it visually appealing. And the good thing about doing a boxing event there is like with the UFC, there's an expectation that an entire card is going to be great, right? Like people were looking at that Noche card. They're like, oh, I don't know if this is a great card. In boxing, you just need one great fight, right? Like, and because of that, you can really maximize all of the different auditory experiences you could do around that one fight. And I think that you can kind of maximize it for boxing in that sense. Like, I don't think that people will care what's on the undercard. Like, I went to cover Floyd versus McGregor, and I was just like shocked at how few people were there for the Badou Jack and the Tank
Oh
Davis
yeah.
fights. Like, there was nobody there. It's like basically like hundreds of people for the co-main event, and then they all started to kind of filter in towards the end of the co-main event for the main event. Like, we don't see that in the UFC. Like, people are there during the prelims; they want to see all these different fights. So I think that that's why maybe it's a better venue for boxing perhaps than the UFC, just because you can really maximize all of the different elements for that one fight.
That's interesting. Were you on the floor in the press section for this, or were you backstage during the Sphere?
I was on the floor for some of it, like I would say probably 5 or 6 fights, which is a pretty good amount. Um, but when I went to go see that U2 thing a couple days prior, I was in the front row of like the 200 level. Like, I think that's kind of the optimal seat that you would want for an event like that. Like, being on the
Yes.
floor for that event, I don't think did it justice. Like, it still looked amazing and was really cool, but that's one of those ones where like sitting further back is actually probably has more upside than sitting low to the ground. So I think that that's kind of what I would have liked to have experienced if I could have like picked any seat in the building for that event.
I thought what the UFC did show from a TV perspective, they did a really good job at trying to convey how vast and incredible it is. But I think they did have some limitations just from the standpoint of like, you can't distract the fighters. There's only so much you can do when you want the focus to be on the ring. Like the difference in the Dead and Company concert was the focus was almost never on the stage and no one cared. And it's sort of, that's fine. They were like it's almost like when you watch the story that how the Grateful Dead came up, they were like the house band at these LSD parties, right? And it's sort of like you're there for the LSD and the band just happens to be the soundtrack. It almost felt like that, even though that's weird since you're paying all that money to go there to see that band. Do you think the UFC, for having done an incredible job with that, could do more, or anyone else for that matter, in terms of like, because when I originally thought fights at the Sphere, I didn't know if it would work, but I'm thinking like, if you're playing them on a screen where they're 800 feet tall, that's insane. But that didn't actually happen, right? It was like more of like mini screens.
Yeah, and when I spoke to Craig Borsari, like leading up to the event, that's what he said. It was going to be kind of cutouts, they called them, where you could watch the events. Then around the cutouts, that's where they add those kind of immersive worlds that were like not too distracting, right? Like, they were cool to look at, and then it would be cool to kind of glimpse at them every now and then. But it didn't really take away from the fights, which I liked. Like, I thought they did a really great job in terms of putting that event together.
Yeah.
And when we did the scrum with Dana on Friday, right at the end, he goes, "Guys, I want you guys to be as critical as possible after this event. Like, what if you feel like there's thing we could have done better? Like, please be like as critical as you'd like." So I wrote a column last week, and I outlined like a couple almost like minor changes really that they could have made that I thought would have been um, a better way to execute the event. Which, like, again, they're very like minute changes. Which was like that first video they play that at the end of the prelims. Like, you want people that are watching TV to get kind of a little taste. They didn't really do much with the Sphere during the prelims. Like, give them a little taste of what they're going to get if they're going to buy the event. That was one like kind of minor change that I had in mind. And then also for fighter walkouts, it would have been cool to have really like kind of customized fighter walkouts for each fighter that were very much animated. You get like some really high profile kind of Mexican artists to animate those and design those. But I also see that the downside of that, like as I wrote in the column, was like if somebody pulls out of a fight, it's like, okay, well, we just lost like $4 million in production because now we don't have an intro and we need to like draw one up. Like, you have to have those kind of things in mind, right? So again, these are just kind of like finer details, but I think that you can always improve on something. If you have the mindset you've built the perfect thing, then you're probably not going to be able to improve. And I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
don't
that's
know
the
if
kind of
who's
mindset
going to
the
be able
UFC
to
has.
afford though to take another swing at that. It doesn't seem, listening to Dana, like that's even a possibility for TKO Endeavor, because it's stupidly expensive. I mean, it just is at the end of the day. So it's different when a band can get a house run and do like Dead and Company did like
Right.
4 months there than that. Speaking of Dana, like Luke and I talk about this a lot, especially off camera. There's like some changes going on in Dana. And it's not just, I don't think, like the interest now in boxing, but it feels like the first like 6, 7 months of this year and all of last year, it was like constant, angry, defensive, almost warring with the media. Now it's almost like the Dana from like 2000, 10 or 11, like the jovial, like, hey, what do you guys think? Let's debate. Like, is that strategic? Like, what do you think's triggered all that?
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. Like, and I agree with you, but I don't really know what like the conduit for that was. Like, why suddenly, he's a little bit, I guess, more less combative, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that's a good question. Like, why is he suddenly, yeah, a little bit more media friendly? I have no idea. Like, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know that the rights deal for next year is on the table. I don't know if that could be the reason. That's just speculative, but I'm not really sure. I like it. It's nice to
It's
see.
been
It's nice to see
refreshing.
him
Yeah.
being a little bit warmer because that's kind of how he was. Like, if you remember, like before I started covering the sport, the one thing that I used to always look forward to after the pay per view events was Dana's scrums. He used to do those scrums with media where he
Must
used to
see
like always have
TV.
these nuggets.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was must, like every morning after a pay per view, I would be like, I need to find the video for this, so I can see what he said in these scrums. And that was when there were like maybe 4 or 5 people in those scrums. It wasn't a whole lot of people that got access to those scrums because there weren't that many people covering the sport at the time, really. And those scrums always like kind of unlocked these like little hints and nuggets about what was to come in the coming months, and I always loved watching those.
I mean, it was a different time, but like I remember 10 years ago working at ESPN where Dana would once a year come to ESPN. It wouldn't be like a big publicized trip. Like, he'd do Sports Center or whatever. But the main point was to sit down with all of us that did MMA coverage there and kind of just, talk about how can we support each other more? What do you like about our coverage? What would change? I mean, Dana was like a guy's guy during those sessions. It wasn't hard to like him in that regard. So I don't know. It's interesting. I do miss that time when it felt more like the fans, the media, and the UFC brass were sort of all in it together on the same lines, fighting for, I don't know, respectability, right? Or for commercial success. It was like we were all in on the same goal to get this sport over the hump. I kind of miss those days, Bron. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that Dana likes having people that are kind of challengers in his life. You hear stories of him talking about going and playing baccarat and blackjack and stuff. Like he needs to win. Like that's kind of his mentality, right? So I feel like if things are going well for the business and like they look at their balance sheet and things are doing great, it's like he needs to find anything that's critical of what they're doing, or anything that he like, even to an extent like him doing power slap and stuff. Like I feel like a lot of that is rooted in like he's looking to win and looking for critics so that he can, show them what's what. Like I think that that's just kind of part of his personality, which I think has made the UFC what it is today, is him having that kind of mindset where like just kind of get out of my way and like watch me cook. Like I think that's just sort of what he does and what he does really well.
Well, I want to see what's going on with all these boxing rumors. It's interesting. It's freaking interesting. It is. All right, Bron, let's switch gears. You are a dad of 3. Is that correct?
3, yeah.
What do we got on the ages in sexes these days of these great Bronsteter kids?
All right. So within the next month, like I've got 2 kids that are having their birthday. So I'll just give you those ages that they're going to be. So turning 14, then I've got my son is 8, and then my daughter is my youngest is turning 6. So like a
So
nice kind of gap.
that is a nice spread out gap of different life experiences. I've got the 2 16 year old twins about to be 17, juniors in high school, so it's sort of a different era now. But I always joke that like for whatever fame we have in this industry, because we're front facing in our business, boy, am I not famous in my house, and boy, is no one enamored with with too much that goes down in this basement in this chair right here. What's it like in the Braun house? Are the 3 kids like, yeah, dad's on TV again, this guy's a stud? Or is it more like, hey dad, I need those ice skates now, go to the store, get them?
Oh yeah, my kids don't care at all that I'm on TV. The only people that show them anything that I'm doing on TV is like my parents. When they stay
That's
over at
it.
my parents' house, they'll like show video. They're like, "Oh, look, your dad's doing this," but they don't care at all. Like it, my son was impressed yesterday, my oldest son, because he was having like an issue with his Ubisoft account. Like he's playing Rainbow Six Siege and trying to add like an add-on pack. And I told him that I had a friend who worked at Ubisoft, and that impressed him that
Oh
I knew
yeah.
somebody who worked for like the gaming company. So like that, those are where I can get my points. Like whenever I can, my son loves this YouTuber named Flamingo, who's also like a combat sports fan, and like Ben the Bane Davis asked him to record like a little video for my son, and my son was like crying. He was so happy
That's
that he got this
awesome.
video. So anytime I can like take my position and like find avenues
Yes.
to like do stuff that they think is cool, I'll always go out of my way to do that. But it isn't much. Like there's just not much overlap with what I do and what they like. Like my son's into like YouTubers and stuff like that. at 14. But now we're starting to get into music, like mostly hip hop stuff, and like we can kind of talk about those and like
That's
introduce them to hip hop
awesome.
albums. So that's kind of been a cool, fresh thing for us.
I had the same thing where it's like only the times I was interviewing Jake Paul regularly was I a hit, because then the kids could tell their friends and it was like a thing, right? But outside of that, oh, I did have Sami Zayn one time record a birthday message back when they were into that, and they were fired up. But yeah, it's few and far. I think they respect my hustle. They love me as dad, but it is hard for them to look at that as the volume of what it is, of what we've accomplished in this walk, for whatever that means. But Bron, you and I most connect on vinyl, on the tunes, brother. But like for as I'm as a hobbyist, I started pandemic. I've got probably 700-800 records and running out of space, but it's my passion, it's my life. You wheel and deal and have been up in the thousands at certain points. Like when did the vinyl journey begin for you?
I'm currently like in the thousands. So like my vinyl journey, so to speak, started in like 2003. So we're talking like 21 years ago,
So wait,
around
back
that
then
time.
you can buy any great record for like 50 cents, right? Nobody wants them.
Yeah, like there was a like that was back in the day where you could buy a copy of like Fleetwood Mac's Rumors for $2 and like Bowie records for $5. So like that's when I first kind of got started. Was just like going to stores. Like there was a store in Toronto called Discovery Records, and they had their whole inventory online. It wasn't like an online store, but they had like all their inventory. And I would just like be like, okay, I'm gonna drive and pick up this. Like I'd just make a list of the ones that they had in stock. I'd walk in, I'd go to like the different racks, pick them out, and they were like $7-8, right? Like you could get like a copy of, I don't know, like the Doors' Strange Days for like $7. So I was like, I would just go and drop like whatever $100 and get like 12 records. Like that's kind of how it was back then. Whereas now $100 will buy you like 2, 3 records, 4 records if
Yeah,
you're
it
talking new
depends on
records.
the yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to live in the $2 bins, but you like the collector's items.
Yeah, like when we went shopping the other day, I bought like a rare Christian folk album that was private press that's like sealed. Like that's I like collectors weird stuff like that. Just to like kind of have it because I feel like I own like a piece of a very like not well known entity that like these kind of like dudes that probably are now like working or may no longer be with us. Actually, I have it right here. Was this like Agape Brothers? Like I bought this
Yes,
at
I
like
was I was with you when you got that. Yes.
and I like didn't need it, but like the guy kept lowering the price, and I was like, okay, I'll pick it up. But yeah, it's like got like a Bible verse on the back, like it's just kind of cool stuff, right? Like that's kind of like what I delve into nowadays because I have a lot of stuff that I want already. Like there are still some that I chase after that I'd love to get the like Ween's first 7-inch that they did. It cost like $700, and I'm just like can't spend like $700 on this. But like if the right opportunity comes and it's like $400,
Now, are
maybe
you
I'll bite the
always
bullet.
thinking as like I can always flip this down the line for more? Or are you thinking like I want this on the shelf forever? I want to look at it. I
It's a
want to
bit of
feel it.
both, right? Like for certain records, if I buy something, I'm like, okay, well, like if I end up not wanting this in the future, like I know that I can make back what I'm spending on it. But like there are other ones where I just like I kind of want to just have it, like always have it, like keep it and just like have it on my shelf, like you said. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
I got this new one of my new segments. I mean, they're all new. I just launched this
Yeah,
YouTube channel.
everything's new.
Yeah, I got this top five segment where I did a quick and fun, easy one. My top five favorite album covers of all time. And we've talked about this before. You've been a great friend and shot me a package of records a few times. And I've got my favorites: Bitches Brew, Wish You Were Here. What album covers do you think like that you would even frame just for the art of it?
I don't have any. I have one record that's framed because it's signed by the band. That actually is one of my favorite covers, which is Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies.
That's
The
a great
Mollusk,
colorful one. Yeah.
yeah, the Mollusk by Ween. Forever Changes is one of my favorite album covers by Love. That incredible string band record I sent you, the
Yes.
5,000 Spirits, is like one of my favorite album covers. Also, it's awesome. And then there are a couple album covers that I think are just like really cool, like the America's Greatest Hits is like drawn by Phil Hartman, which I just think is like really cool. And like there's like a Poco album that like Phil Hartman did the artwork for. Like
That's
I
wild.
always like if I was gonna frame an album, I just think that would be a cool album to own, like something that Phil Hartman designed because he was like before he was in comedy was like an artist that designed like certain record covers. Like those are the kind of cool things that I think about also.
One of my favorite, I don't know if you call it a trope or hobbies when it comes to the vinyl collection, because there's no better, you have your family time, you have dinner, whatever, however you flow in your family, but there's no better man time than for me to go to the office, put the headphones on, lay back, put some 90s NBA on the YouTube, real nerd stuff, but then read the liner notes while I'm listening to the record and read the, Wikipedia entry and read every So my favorite thing is to find famous people who guest sessioned on famous songs that people don't even know about. And it's not just that we find out years later that Michael McDonald was doing like background vocals for Michael Jackson. I mean, like Teach Your Children by Crosby, Stills and Nash, Jerry Garcia on slide guitar, on pedal steel guitar, or, what was it by Neil Young? Heart of Gold has James Taylor on banjo. Do you
Great.
ever have
Yeah.
any of those where you come across and you're like, your mind is blown?
No, but I like doing deep dives on albums. Like there are a lot of podcasts that I listen to where it's just people talking about albums that they made or like
Yes.
people discussing albums. Like I get into the weeds. I've read like those 33 and a third books, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. You
I've
you
read
sent me
like
one on Electric Ladyland that I'm halfway through, and it's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, I read a lot of those 33 and a third ones. I own like a bunch of coffee table books with like cool album covers. Like I can see them from here. I've got my jazz covers, which is like a bunch of just kind of Blue Note and like Impulse album covers, funk and soul cool album covers. Like it's a company called Tashin, and they put them out. They're just kind of these coffee table books that talk about the artwork of each album cover, and like I like again very nerdy stuff like that.
Yeah, we definitely, both of us have our own side lanes that we go down with weird genres, but we do align on a lot of it. Have you made the transition, because you're a Radiohead guy and I'm really coming along on the latter half of their catalog that I admit, I knew the 90s big ones, of course. Are you into the Smile, which brings what Tom York from Radiohead, and then a band you got me into, one of the drummers from Sons of Kemet is in that one. And dude, some of those live shows I watched on YouTube of Sons of Kemet, I know they've disbanded, so I never got to see them live, and but how much are you liking the Smile so far?
I love the Smile. New album tomorrow. The second album of this year.
Wait,
Is
new album? Because I'm just
new album
digesting the new
tomorrow
album.
called Cutouts, I think it's called. Yeah, it's their third album already. And I read there was a great piece on Stereo Gum today where they're talking about how like if you listen to the last Radiohead album, Moonshaped Pool, like their albums are so pristine. Like everything
Yes,
about them is so thoughtful and like perfect, right? Like they're basically every album I think after Pablo Honey, I would say is like a pretty perfect album.
they're artists,
Um,
true artists.
yeah,
Yes,
true artists. But the Smile, like because they're releasing music so often, we have to kind of like accept that like the albums are not going to have the same mastery as Radiohead, but you're still getting a lot of music from Tom York and Johnny Greenwood and like the aforementioned Tom Skinner from Sons of Kemet, and like it's still a great music. Like we're talking like 9.5 out of 10 albums, but they're not going to have that same like level of perfection that
yes.
Radiohead had with their albums, where like you have like Nigel Godrich like fine tuning every like note of the album. Like when I heard Moonshaped Pool for the first time, that came out 8 years ago, which is shocking to me. Like it just blew my mind how good it was. And I've got a buddy who's like one of the biggest Radiohead fans in the world. Like has like a Hail to the Thief tattoo that took like 4
Damn.
sessions to do, and like has like owns tons of different like rarities and stuff like that. And I sent them like after Moonshaped Pool, I'm like, this could be their best album. Like this album's amazing. And he was like, yeah, dude. Like I don't like maybe it is right. Like we're just like have our minds blown by these albums when they come out, and you have to listen to them like 10 times to like notice the finer details. Like
No,
I don't think the
10 times to
Smile.
begin, 10
Yeah,
times just to open the door and begin
right.
to
Yeah,
understand.
that's kind of what I mean. Like right when you get it, you kind of have to like digest it a bunch of times and be like, wow. And that album, like I love Moonshaped Pool. That's like an underrated album. And there's like I know it's a newer album, but like
I
it's
haven't
up there with
dove
really
in.
anything they've done.
I,
Um,
I'm still trying to figure out whether In Rainbow's OK Computer or Kid A is their best record. What is their best record in your opinion?
My favorite Radiohead album, I'm not gonna call it their best, but my favorite is Amnesiac, because I got Amnesiac at like a certain time in my life where it really like resonated with what was going on with me. And that album for me just like I connected with it so well. And I don't know why, because Amnesiac is almost like a B-side album to Kid A. But I actually
In a lot of
enjoy
ways, yeah.
yeah, like I actually enjoy Amnesiac more than any other Radiohead album from like start to finish. Like that's an album where I can't start it without finishing it. Like I have to listen to it from start to finish.
That's all of
I
Radiohead
love
for
I
me.
love that album.
It's destination listening. You have to
Yeah.
tell everyone to leave you alone and turn the cell phone off. It's like that's the immersion level you have to give it. You have to live it, experience, and feel it, not background music.
I
I'm
don't feel
trying.
that way about OK Computer though. I feel like OK Computer I can put on like electioneering or I can put on like um a very like Paranoid Android, like various songs from that album where I can listen to them and enjoy them as kind of like and same with the Bends, I would say, because they're more rock albums. Like where I can listen to certain tracks, but like Kid A is one of those ones where like I kind of need time with it. And like all the Radiohead albums really after that, I think Hail to the Thief and like King of Limbs, In Rainbows, like those are all ones that I need to like listen to from front to back.
Dude, National Anthem on Kid A, that jazz
Oh,
fusion
it's
tune
amazing.
is it just
Amazing.
blew me away.
So
I'm
good.
trying to keep these to 30 minutes or less, but now you got me wanting to spin off and do the A Bron vinyl
It's
show
okay. The
moving
pizza
forward. So
delivery can be late. It's
so
okay.
clear out your schedule. We may have to get there. I want to close with this question. Remember when that John Cusack movie came out, High Fidelity, which
Mhm.
was a lot about vinyl. At the time, everyone was like, dude, this is your movie because I've always had a working top 5 or top 10 on everything in my life because I guess I'm weird and like that. But one of the things I always regularly have is who's the GOAT of music in my life. Like in high school, it was the Beatles, it became Zeppelin, it became the Stones, it became Bob Dylan for about a decade, it became the Grateful Dead for a little bit. The last few years, it actually was Joni Mitchell. I mean, there was a point where I was so into, I'm like, she might actually be the greatest artist of all time. I've come back to Jimi Hendrix right now. Oh, Miles Davis for a hot second was my goat too. And it's just sort of you're saying like, look, I've experienced a lot of singer songwriters, everything, every part that goes into being the artist. But to me, this person might be the greatest. For me, right now, it's Hendrix. Who right now for you, if you can answer it, is the goat?
I think it's probably Miles. And the reason why is just because when he would like make albums and then everybody else would kind of go towards where Miles was going. Like that he just kept reinventing jazz over and over again.
Yes.
Which no, you can't really say that about any other artist where you can say that they like took a genre and continued to move the genre as a whole forward, right? Like Miles took like, so like of course there was like hard bop, which he's kind of like one of the fathers of hard bop. And then he like moves jazz, like he started doing soundtracks like the French soundtrack that he did.
Oh, that
Um
soundtrack he did for
Ascenseur, I forget what it's called. It's like
the
a French,
Ascenseur
yeah,
one is
yeah.
incredible.
It's
So is
amazing.
Someday My Prince Will Come is an
Yeah, Sunday, yeah,
incredible
it's
record.
great.
Yeah.
But then he just kept moving along with like he would get into like certain like rock and rhythm and blues, and he'd be like, I need to like take jazz into these. Like you listen to like On the Corner, it's like a funk album, like a jazz funk album, and like
There's so much
Bitches
guitar in
Brew,
that. It's heavy too. It's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Bitches Brew is like free jazz, but also very like fusiony. Like there's just so many different things that he did over the course of his career to change the genre and morph it based on what he was hearing from other genres. Like he wasn't taking stuff from jazz and borrowing it in like the latter part of what he was doing. He was taking things from like R&B and like even hip hop in like towards the end of his life when he was
Yes.
reinventing jazz again, like just like absurd level of ingenuity and innovation that he brought to a singular genre. Like I don't think that there's another artist that you can say that about. Like I think Radiohead like is a good example in rock where like they were pretty much like an alternative rock band and then moved into kind of the more electronic stuff and more. And you know what? Bowie is another one. Like Bowie,
It's not
if
a
you
bad
listen to the
answer.
different decades of Bowie and like how it started off kind of like 60s R&B rock, moving into the more glam rock and moving along. And then you listen to like even his last for his 90s stuff, the industrial stuff he was doing, like the electronic and industrial stuff is amazing. And like he was just like Miles Davis, I think very similar mindset, whereas like I'm hearing this from other places and this is like the direction. Have you ever watched that clip that it makes the rounds from time to time of him talking about the internet? Bowie talking about like what
No,
the internet would become? You should find it because
I
he was like
will.
100% right of what like the internet was going to become. And like that's just like he just knew the directions that things were going in and was able to like go in all of those directions with his music. Like those are the kind
Genius.
of pioneers that are just like when I think of all-time geniuses, I think Bowie, I think Miles Davis.
I mean,
Like
dude, I
Hendrix is
even
hard because Hendrix had such a short shelf life because he
yeah,
died so young.
I got one more question on Hendrix to close, but I will say I even bought some early 80s Miles. I bought Star People, which what you were saying before. I
It's
mean,
amazing. Yeah.
he just dove into every genre and made it his own. It was incredible. To close, I want to put our goats together. The 27 Club robbed us of a lot of great uh goat potentials in their prime, or maybe you could say heroin did. I mean, I don't know, whatever you want to go there. I had this debate with O'Teal Burbridge on his podcast, from Dead and Company, my friend. If Hendrix hadn't died, then he would have lived through the dawn of, I mean, he died at the beginning of 70s jazz fusion and these super groups. Him and Miles would have put out a record together, and it would have blown my face off in hindsight. Like, do you lament that as much as I do? I keep trying to imagine every day what it would have sounded like.
Yeah, see, I'm lucky. He did sessions with Arthur Lee, who's like one of my all-time favorites, lead singer of Love. So that actually exists. So I don't actually lament it because I like have that. I have that little piece of Jimmy with one of my favorite artists that I can kind of hang on to, which is nice. But yeah, like if Jimmy and Miles did stuff together, like they inhabited this earth at the same time. And the 27 Club is like so crazy because there's so many good musicians that died at that age. Like to me, Chris Bell is one of the ones that like people don't talk enough about. Like one half of Big Star.
From Big Star. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
like
Am the
they like
Cosmos.
basically
Chris
yeah,
Bell. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Like basically pioneered what we know as like power pop, which I think like
Yes.
without that, you don't get like Weezer, you don't get like the emo genre. I think a lot of like at least the wave of emo genre with like the Get Up Kids, Sunny Day Real Estate, like I think a lot of that all spawned from like the birth of power pop through Big Star and the amount of bands that like people talk about Velvet Underground influencing bands. Like I think Big Star probably influenced just as many bands as well. And yeah, like one of the kind of sad things about with Chris Bell is like he actually was kind of not even in Big Star at the time of his passing. Like they had already moved on and done another album without him. So it's like, but it's just a very sad. It's sad to see how many different. I think Janis Joplin was 27. I think Jim
Yes.
Morrison was
Brian
27. Like
Jones.
they're
So
yeah,
Amy Winehouse. There's been a
yeah,
lot of them
so
through the
many.
years. I'm glad I
Hmm.
made it to 46. We'll see what happens. All right, Bron, I'm going to cut off this overtime of wellness check, but you got me fired up to create a vinyl spin-off podcast because I can
All
talk
right,
music
I'm your guy.
history every day of the week. He's SportsNet's Aaron Bronsteter. Can you sell anything? You want to plug anything besides the entire 125 division? I mean, that was not fair. It's crass. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I'll just plug the BCX and tell people to subscribe and like these videos because
Wow.
I think that what you're doing is a great thing, and I'm excited to see what else you're able to do. I've been listening, like I've subscribed to the audio podcast. Like I'm the rare MK listener who doesn't watch, who listens to Have You Seen This Ish on my like and tries to picture. It's like theater of the mind. Like I try to picture what's happening in the videos.
Yes, yes.
And like I never watch the videos of the show. I just listen. And I
You're
find that
missing
to
a
be
lot
like
of great 9/11 humor, but I'm not proud of that.
no,
All
no,
right,
I hear all of that. I still hear all of it, but like I'm talking about what in terms of the videos that you guys do every week. Like I just try to picture in my mind what's going on in those videos, and like just hearing Luke laugh is one of my favorite things too, because he's just such like
that's the whole
a
point of that
surly
segment.
guy.
Make Luke
Yeah,
laugh. That's the whole
yeah.
point. Hey, Bron, thank you for
Yeah,
your service. We'll be doing this again if you're willing. Okay,
always,
that's the
man.
point. All right.
Anytime, whenever I can talk music with people, sign me up.
There it is. Wellness check. Aaron Bronsteter. Turns out he's doing good. Check out his work. Thank you. So